What's up, MetaNerdz? This breakdown of the Kandosii-type Dreadnought will take us back to the Old Republic era, a time when the Mandalorian fleets were at their peak strength, seeing its complement, armament, and a ton more, as well as how its legacy would affect the galaxy for thousands of years. But first, let's thank this video's sponsor, Saber. Right now they have a June special. All lightsabers are 40% off, with free shipping on all orders, and an additional $15 off when you use our discount code MetaNerdz at checkout. Just look at these incredible designs, ranging from simple and effective to elaborate and ornate. My tips would be to check out the Replica collection if you want something from your favorite character, the Padawan collection for simpler pieces, but there really are some great ones even at this lower price. This one is both hilarious, unique, and maybe my favorite, but make sure you also check out the theme sabers for one-of-a-kind crossovers. Check out the link in the description. It's all 40% off, free shipping, and an additional $15 off with code MetaNerdz. It's a great sale, and I'm sure you'll fall in love with at least one of these designs. It was created by various Mandalorian manufacturers, but would not have included the famed Mando motors, since that most famous manufacturer was not even a millennia old by the time of the Battle of Yavin. Sounds funny to consider them a young company, but for reference, Rendili Hyperworks and Kuat Drive Yards were making major warships for the Republic for at least 4,000 years. And its manufacturer isn't some Mandalorian secret, but even they lost all accounts of this due to their fracturing from the Mandalorian Wars on, from 3,976 BBY up to what we see in the post-Imperial era with Bo-Katan and Din Djarin. These people would lose a lot of their history to infighting, which in a twisted way shows just how important other aspects were to their culture, since the history and traditions that do survive had to survive countless forces pulling them apart. And yet things like their armor, Great Dragon symbolism, and Mandoa language were cherished enough to remember and keep alive. Which really says something, because what we do know of the manufacturer is that though they forgot which of the Mando companies produced the Kandosii, they proudly remember that they stole this tech from the Fenalar species, a history that includes their extermination by the Mandalorian Crusaders around 6,700 BBY. The Fenalar were a highly advanced people that produced great dreadnoughts and armor. This armor was made of frick, which was a lightsaber and blaster-resistant rare material, in a class shared only with Cortosis and Beskar. They weren't claiming to be the geniuses that designed it, but were proud that they conquered these people, seizing their warships and Jedi-stopping armor, before exterminating them and incorporating these designs the nerd species developed into their more powerful and thus divinely supported civilization. Their war god smiled as fittingly this line of Mando-produced dreadnoughts based off this conquered tech would be named the Kandosii, meaning indomitable or ruthless in the Mandoade language. It is unclear how much of this design was uniquely developed by the Mando engineers over the years, but the dreadnought that would introduce itself to the Old Republic and Sith factions was this model, which cost 200 million credits. And since inflation seems non-existent in the galaxy far, far away, you can compare that cost with later ships like the Imperial and Venator Star Destroyers, showing something similar to the Keldaabe, the effects of economy at scale seen in Kuat Drive Yards being able to produce something cheaper and in most ways better. At a length of 1,360 meters, or about 0.85 miles, it was right in between the Venator and Imperial, and more than 4 times the Old Republic Hammerhead. The height is about 680 meters, or 0.42 miles, making it about 2 Zillo beasts taller than an ISD, while at a width of 397 meters, or a quarter mile, it was more than twice the Hammerhead, while being thinner than both Kuat craft. With its Class 2 hyperdrive rating, it was on par with most capital ships across all eras, with the faster Class 1 being an exception, and it did have a backup Class 9. In the Keldaabe, we saw a rare shield leeching technology, and the Mandos sure do like to keep their shields interesting, with this dreadnought having double-layered deflector shields. As good as that sounds, there must be a reason we don't see this tech even in Mon Calamari designs, which are usually considered to have the best shielding devices out there. It reminds me more of the cheaper, improvised type of armor you might find, like when real-world troops add sandbags or cages to stop penetration from explosive devices. No other manufacturer would use this double shield method, they would just make the shield stronger, and there would be the issue of shield projectors feeding into each other, so to make this work there's likely 2 different systems. Don't get me wrong, I think it's genius and a simple, practical solution, since 2 different types of shield projectors meant that you could hope that outer layer could be replaced before the final layer was defeated. But just like how no manufacturer is sending out troop carriers with sandbags and body armor stacked on top, that's something the troops developed from their battlefield experience, I think the Mandalorians improvised this double shield from their non-stop campaigns throughout the galaxy, and saw that it did actually work. The whole plating comes from a rare source, the company Biblos Drive Yards, which of all things would be most known for the G1A Starfighter used by Zuckuss. This company was great for developing cloaking technology, but not at the capital ship scale. Its armament consisted of 5 heavy turbolaser batteries, 4 point defense medium ion cannons, and 2 triple laser point defense laser cannons, with a pair of super heavy concussion missile batteries and a total of 120 missiles on board, as well as 2 tractor beam batteries. When compared to the Clone Wars era on, the Kandosii is a bit light, but it really isn't too far behind, especially considering that they went all in on the missiles, having about twice that of the Venator, while the ISD had none. The Imperial craft focused on cannons and tractor beams, better for capturing sneaky rebel ships, but the ancient Mandoade were willing to completely destroy anything in their path, knowing that if they did wish to take an enemy alive, they could send out their complement of 128 DAVAAB-type starfighters to neutralize the engines and guns of an enemy ship, and send over boarding crews via the 8 Shadlar-type trooper ships, while the number of Basilisk war droids was described simply as numerous. The DAVAAB was your standard fighter, but the Shadlar was this horrifying spider that could dig on or crawl across your space station or capital ship, and like a mama spider full of eggs on her back, this thing could unleash a swarm of 800 troops. That means that each carried more than an entire clone battalion. That's a total of 6,400 jetpack sporting Mandalorians that could be moved from the Kandosii to any target in a single wave. And of course, they could shuttle back and forth during major offensives, since there was a total of 30,000 troops on board each Kandosii. So all of them could be transported with these 8 Shadlars, making 5 trips each, meaning you could be resupplying certain areas or choosing 40 different targets to drop more than a battalion on, exiting via these hangars below on some models, while others have it on these long sections up top, open on each end. The difference can easily be explained as different variants over the years, and either form provides great cover and rapid deployment, as you can't hit them as they exit when facing dead on, and when on the ventral side they could peel out each way or continue straight back to circle around, or just drop down right on top of the target, using the massive double-shielded Kandosii to escort them all the way up, absorbing whatever defenses the enemy might have, and unleashing the fighters and transports to make that final short trip down to the surface of the planet, station, or ship. You can see why when all of this is considered, it's not underpowered at all, and we haven't even looked at how effective the super heavy concussion missile batteries are. We'll see that when we look at the history. The crew was 10,000 in number, so a total of 40k is about 4 times the Venator, but a lot closer to the ISD. And since these Mandos were used to more Spartan quarters, you could pack them in a lot closer, and you can see why the Mandalorians of this era, with proper militaries and huge numbers, were such an overwhelming force for most of the galaxy. While the cargo capacity of 45,000 tons meant every single Mando on board could have a whole can-do back to enjoy for the length of the campaign. The only obvious issue to point out is that some of these guns are blocked by its own structures, reducing some of the forward-facing fire from the cannons, but they were expecting to make this up with the barrage of missiles coming from the bow and this entire lower protruding superstructure. These cannons are canted and could fire forward and back, while you might expect these ones up top to be ion weaponry, with the point defense lasers and anti-starfighter roll scattered across various surfaces. As for their history, the Mandalorian Wars would bring the full might of their fleets against the Republic in 3,964 BBY, starting with the Battle of Vanquo. But many point to the Crusader raids that started in 3,976 and kept ramping up until they had to be opposed by the Jedi-led Republic military. Their fleets were anchored by the powerful Kandosiis, along with the Krymud-type battleship, Jahave-type assault ship, dungeon ships, Q-carriers, and Taroch-type gunships. These were used to blitz Vanquo, easily overwhelming them with these powerful capital ships and an insane number of troops that could be rapidly transported. And then this tactic was seen on Tarsus, though this fight was more difficult, requiring a 3-pronged defensive that eventually did result in a valuable addition to the growing empire of Mandalore the Ultimate. His Neo-Crusaders were operating from an HQ established on the frozen world of Jebel, and they quickly set sights on Sirocco. This world had full member status in the Republic, and this battle would forever change the relationship between the Mandalorians and the rest of the galactic community. The Jedi and Republic forces would lead Battle Group Sirocco from the Inexpugnable-class tactical command ship named Courageous, forming a blockade with Hammerheads, Forays, and Aurok starfighters. When the Mando force did pop out of hyperspace, confirming their intel, they saw that the Kandosiis immediately opened with a full volley of missiles. All power was directed to the forward shields. They showed a previously unknown capability. As the missiles raced toward the Republic capital ship, they abruptly changed direction, and within seconds were striking the surface of Sirocco. Their plan was to cut off all the ground reinforcements, as the Republic was planning to cycle out forces in the blockade as the space battle raged on. They saw the mushroom clouds forming all across the planet. These were not conventional weapons, but nuclear warheads that had turned the Republic bases and major cities into massive glass craters. Only 8 ships would be able to make it off-world and evacuate the fallout. As the battle continued, the Republic fleet would be pursued into deep space, and the Mandalorian Neo-Crusaders showed just how well they had perfected ship boarding. Going right for the head, the flagship of Admiral Karath was swarmed by Mando transports, and now close-quarters combat skills would determine the outcome of this first official battle between these two powerful factions. The Courageous was still trying to flee, as the Mandos were clearing decks, and the crew was making desperate attempts to get away via escape pods. Karath tried to make a last stand with Jedi allies and elite troops, but eventually they were surrounded in the brig. Luckily for them, their Jedi helped use the Force to create an opening, and these last defenders narrowly escaped with their lives. With this overwhelming victory motivating them, the Mandalorians would push all the way to the core and strike fear into all the elites on Coruscant, the ancient and original homeworld of the Mandalorian ancestors. But eventually, the might of this ship would have to be turned against their own HQ on Jebel, when Cassius Fett was faced with stopping the Rakul Plague, a disease engineered by an ancient Sith Lord Karnus Mur. It would kill over 60 million on Taurus and 1 million Mandalorians on Jebel before Fett gave the order to glass this world and contain the plague. With the bombardment of nukes and the resulting fallout, this threat to the Mandos was finally stopped. Over the next 3,000 years, the Mandalorians' grasp on the galaxy would slowly fade, due to responses by the Jedi, Republic, and betrayals from their Sith allies, but mostly from the fracturing within their own clans, something they would never fully recover from. And while the might of the Mando fleets was gone, the memory of the Kandosii would go on to influence the Dreadnought-class heavy cruiser, manufactured by their old enemy, Rendili, but also the Mandel Motors creation, the Crusader-class corvette. As for behind-the-scenes facts, according to the Knights of the Old Republic campaign guide, a notable flaw in their design was that their hyperspace navigation systems could be crippled by a strategically placed charge in the rear, which must have been tricky to pull off when the double shields were activated. There's a rich modding community out there that involves this craft, and even a fan-made Kandosii too. It's really interesting. If you want to check it out, links to all these sources are in the description, while most of this info comes from the Knights of the Old Republic comic series, Essential Guide to Warfare, and Dreadnoughts of Rendili. Likes, comments, and shares are the best way to help me out. Subscribe if you want to see more. But most important of all, remember, the greatest source of nightmare fuel in the galaxy is nuclear-powered Mandos. And the Force will be with you. Always.